They were celebrated on national television, drafted by the biggest franchises in America. Some signed contract worth tens of millions of dollars. But for the men in this documentary, what happened off the field became their defining legacy. Not the touchdowns, not the Super Bowl rings, not the records. What you're about to see is a collection of stories the highlight reels never showed. Crimes that shocked the country, lives that were destroyed, and in some cases, the men responsible are still out there today. This is the dark side of the NFL. Rafel Jerome Cierre, born December 19th, 1961 in Little Rock, Arkansas, was a defensive back in the NFL from 1985 to 1988. Drafted in the 5th round out of the University of Hawaii, Cierre suited up for the Washington Redskins in 1985, then moved on to the Detroit Lions from 1987 to 1988. He wore number 45 at times, and while he never earned Pro Bowl honors, he had a solid early career presence as a reliable special teams contributor and defensive back. In August 1999, Cierre was arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of his wife, Jerry Cierre, whose body was discovered inside their home. Prosecutors asserted that he strangled her. The case was high-profile, given his NFL background and his relative obscurity beyond the field. The investigation led to a murder trial where Cierre was initially convicted and sentenced to life in prison. That verdict was later overturned and a retrial was ordered due to juror misconduct. At retrial in early 2001, the jury again found him guilty of first-degree murder. This time he received a fixed 30-year term in the Arkansas Department of Corrections. Cierre became eligible for parole after serving 2 decades. Records show he was released on parole in July 2023 after nearly 24 years behind bars. Rae Carruth was once a rising star in the NFL. Drafted in the 1st round by the Carolina Panthers in 1997, the wide receiver from the University of Colorado showed early promise, earning a spot on the NFL All-Rookie team. But behind the highlight reels and stadium lights, a darker story was taking shape, one that would shock the nation and end his football career forever. In November 1999, Carruth orchestrated a plot that would leave his pregnant ex-girlfriend, Cherika Adams, fatally wounded. As she drove through Charlotte, North Carolina, a car pulled up beside her and opened fire. Miraculously, Cherika managed to call 911, naming Carruth and revealing the ambush was no accident. She clung to life for nearly a month before succumbing to her injuries. Their baby, delivered via emergency C-section, survived but was left with permanent brain damage due to oxygen deprivation during the attack. Carruth fled, sparking a nationwide manhunt. Days later, he was found hiding in the trunk of a car in Tennessee with cash, water, and snacks, preparing, it seemed, for a long disappearance. In 2001, a jury found him guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, shooting into an occupied vehicle and using an instrument to destroy an unborn child. He was sentenced to 18 to 24 years in prison and was released in 2018 after serving nearly 2 decades. Ware Jr., a former NFL tight end, played for the Washington Redskins and the San Francisco 49ers between 2003 and 2004. Though his professional football career was brief, spanning just 16 games with modest statistics, his name would later become synonymous with a far darker chapter. In April 2021, Ware was arrested in Texas for speeding at 115 miles per hour. During the stop, police found cocaine, methamphetamine, marijuana, a loaded AK-47, and a loaded 9mm pistol in his vehicle. As a previously convicted felon, he was charged with drug possession with intent to deliver and unlawful possession of firearms. Just a month later, Ware's girlfriend, 29-year-old Taylor Pomaski, went missing following a party at their home in Spring, Texas. Her disappearance quickly drew suspicion, especially given Ware's recent arrest and documented history of domestic violence. Nearly a year later, in April 2022, human remains found in northern Harris County were confirmed to be Pomaski's. In July 2022, Ware was indicted for murder and tampering with evidence, accused of killing Pomaski and attempting to dispose of her body. Witnesses alleged he had confessed to the killing, describing gruesome details including strangulation, stabbing, and the burning of her remains. On May 7th, 2025, Ware pleaded guilty to both charges and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. The sentence will run concurrently with a separate 15-year sentence he received for the earlier drug and weapons charges. Henry Ruggs III. Once upon a time, Ruggs was one of the NFL's most electrifying young talents. Drafted 12th overall by the Las Vegas Raiders in 2020, the Alabama wide receiver was known for his blazing speed, clocking a 4.27-second 40-yard dash at the NFL Combine. In his rookie season, Ruggs showed flashes of brilliance, offering the Raiders genuine hope for a long-term deep threat weapon. But that promise unraveled in a single tragic moment. In the early hours of November 2nd, 2021, Ruggs was behind the wheel of his Corvette, traveling at a staggering 156 miles per hour down a residential Las Vegas street. His blood alcohol level was twice the legal limit. He collided with a Toyota RAV4, instantly trapping 23-year-old Tina Tinner and her dog inside as flames consumed the vehicle. Tina died at the scene. Ruggs was charged with DUI resulting in death, reckless driving, and multiple related felonies. The crash sent shockwaves through the NFL and beyond. Investigators uncovered damning evidence, surveillance footage, vehicle black box data, and toxicology reports that left little room for doubt. Ruggs was immediately released by the Raiders. In 2023, he pleaded guilty to DUI, resulting in death and vehicular manslaughter. The court sentenced him to 3 to 10 years in prison. If you enjoy watching these stories, please like the video and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello to you in the comments. Eric Naposki played in the NFL during the late 1980s and early 1990s, suiting up for teams like the New England Patriots and the Indianapolis Colts. Known for his explosive tackles and imposing physical presence, Naposki transitioned from the field to private security work in California after his NFL career faded. But what looked like a post-football life of quiet reinvention would soon pull him into a decades-long murder mystery. In December 1994, millionaire businessman Bill McLaughlin was gunned down in his Newport Beach home. At first glance, the case had few leads, no forced entry, no signs of struggle. But beneath the surface, a tangled web of betrayal began to emerge. McLaughlin had been dating a woman named Nanette Johnston, who was also secretly involved with Eric Naposki. Investigators suspected the motive was money. Nanette stood to gain $1 million in life insurance, and Naposki, they believed, had pulled the trigger. Still, the case went cold for over a decade. It wasn't until 2009, 15 years after the killing, that authorities reopened the investigation. Advances in forensic analysis and re-examined witness testimony brought new light to the cold case. Naposki was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. In 2012, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Anthony Wayne Smith once stood as a formidable force on the NFL field. A first-round draft pick in 1990, he played defensive end for the Los Angeles Raiders across 8 seasons, known for his aggressive style and 57.5 career sacks. But after retiring from football in 1998, his life took a dark and irreversible turn. Behind the image of a professional athlete lay a man entangled in a web of violent crimes. Crimes that would eventually eclipse his once promising legacy entirely. In 2011, Smith was charged with the 2008 torture and murder of Marlo Ponce, whose beaten and burned body was discovered in California's Antelope Valley. The case raised serious questions, but it didn't stop there. While awaiting trial, investigators uncovered chilling links to 3 additional killings. Prosecutors alleged that Smith orchestrated the 1999 kidnapping and murder of brothers Kevin and Ricky Nettles, posing as a police officer during the abduction. Then in 2001, Dennis Henderson was beaten and fatally shot following a failed business deal. The allegations painted a deeply disturbing portrait. A man who had allegedly turned from sacks on Sundays to calculated, brutal executions. In 2015, after a lengthy trial and years of legal proceedings, a Los Angeles jury found Smith guilty of 3 of the 4 murders. The crimes were described in court as cruel, premeditated, and unrelenting. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Cierre Wood was once a promising running back best known for his time at Notre Dame, where he rushed for over 1,100 yards in the 2011 season. After going undrafted in 2013, he had brief stints in the NFL with teams like the Houston Texans, New England Patriots, and Buffalo Bills, as well as a period in the CFL with the Montreal Alouettes. Despite limited professional statistics, his college career hinted at real potential. In April 2019, Wood was arrested in Las Vegas alongside his girlfriend, Amy Taylor, following the death of Taylor's 5-year-old daughter, Laura Davis. Authorities allege that the child was subjected to extreme physical punishment under Wood's direction, including forced exercise routines such as wall sits and sprints. The autopsy revealed more than 100 bruises, 20 broken ribs, a lacerated liver, and severe internal bleeding, injuries that ultimately led to her death. In 2024, Wood entered an Alford plea, acknowledging that prosecutors had sufficient evidence to convict him without admitting guilt. He was convicted of second-degree murder and felony child abuse. In August 2024, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 12 years, along with an additional sentence of up to 6 years for the abuse charge. Dwayne Goodrich, a standout cornerback at the University of Tennessee, helped lead the Volunteers to a national championship in 1998 and was selected in the second round of the 2000 NFL Draft by the Dallas Cowboys. Known for his speed and agility, Goodrich seemed poised for a long and successful career in the league. But his rise was short-lived, and his downfall came fast and hard. In the early hours of January 14, 2003, everything changed. Goodrich was driving his BMW at high speed along a Dallas highway when he struck 3 Good Samaritans who had stopped to help a man involved in a fiery car crash. 2 of them, 27-year-old Joseph DeJesus and 23-year-old Sterling Williams, were killed instantly. Witnesses say Goodrich didn't stop. He fled the scene, leaving behind a trail of tragedy and unanswered questions that would soon lead directly to criminal charges. Authorities launched an investigation, and within days, Goodrich turned himself in. He was charged with 2 counts of manslaughter, failure to stop and render aid, and negligent homicide. In 2003, he was convicted and sentenced to 12.5 years in prison. He served 6 years before being released on parole in 2011. What was once a career full of promise had turned into a tale of reckless decisions. A life forever altered and lives lost, all in a matter of seconds. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll be posting a lot more interesting videos on the channel. Hernandez was once a rising star in the NFL, a tight end for the New England Patriots. He was drafted in 2010 and quickly became one of the league's most dynamic offensive threats. In 2011, he helped lead the Patriots to the Super Bowl and by 2012 had signed a $40 million contract extension, cementing his future with one of football's elite franchises. But behind the fame and the touchdowns, a much darker story was unfolding. In June 2013, police found the body of Odin Lloyd, a semi-professional football player, shot execution style in an industrial park near Hernandez's Massachusetts home. Just days later, Hernandez was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The arrest shocked the sports world. Prosecutors alleged Hernandez orchestrated the killing over a perceived slight, claiming Lloyd had disrespected him at a nightclub. But that wasn't all. As the investigation deepened, Hernandez was linked to a separate double homicide from 2012, in which 2 men were shot in a drive-by shooting in Boston. He would later face charges in that case as well. In 2015, Hernandez was convicted of Odin Lloyd's murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Though acquitted in the double homicide in 2017, just days later he was found dead in his prison cell, ruled as suicide. The fall of Aaron Hernandez became a grim and enduring symbol of wasted potential. Lawrence Phillips was hailed as one of the most electrifying running backs of his generation. Born in 1975, he dominated college football at the University of Nebraska, helping lead the Cornhuskers to 2 national championships and earning first-team All-American honors. Drafted 6th overall by the St. Louis Rams in 1996, his raw talent was undeniable. But behind the athletic brilliance was a man spiraling dangerously out of control. Phillips's off-field troubles began early and never let up. In 1995, while still in Nebraska, he was arrested for assaulting his ex-girlfriend, dragging her down a flight of stairs by her hair. Despite the severity of the incident, he was reinstated to the team and allowed to continue playing. Once in the NFL, the pattern only deepened. Phillips faced numerous arrests for domestic violence, DUI, and assault. In 2005, things turned markedly darker. He was convicted of assault with a deadly weapon after driving his car into a group of teenagers following a pickup football game. That conviction landed him a 10-year prison sentence. While serving time, more charges surfaced, this time for choking a girlfriend unconscious in a separate incident. The new conviction added 25 years to his existing term. But the most shocking chapter arrived in 2015, when Phillips was named the prime suspect in the murder of his cellmate at Kern Valley State Prison. Before he could stand trial, Phillips was found dead in his cell in January 2016. His death was ruled a suicide. Justin Bannon, born April 18, 1979 in Sacramento, California, was a former NFL defensive tackle who played from 2002 to 2013. He was drafted in the 5th round by the Buffalo Bills and went on to play for the Baltimore Ravens, Denver Broncos, St. Louis Rams, and Detroit Lions. Over his 12-year career, Bannon appeared in 163 games and recorded over 300 tackles. On October 16, 2019, in Boulder, Colorado, Bannon shot and injured a woman after hiding in a treatment room at an office building. He claimed he was hiding from the Russian mafia and was suffering from severe paranoia at the time. Authorities found 2 loaded handguns and a rolled-up $20 bill with cocaine residue in his possession. Bannon was charged with attempted first-degree murder, attempted second-degree murder, and 2 counts of assault. During the trial, his defense argued that he had suffered significant brain trauma related to his NFL career. However, in September 2021, a jury found him guilty. In February 2022, he was sentenced to 16 years in prison. Brian Blades was a wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks from 1988 to 1998. Drafted in the 2nd round, he played his entire NFL career in Seattle, earning a Pro Bowl selection in 1989 and finishing with over 7,600 receiving yards and 34 touchdowns. A former standout at the University of Miami, Blades was part of a dominant college football era. In July 1995, Blades was involved in a fatal shooting at his home in Plantation, Florida. During an argument, his cousin Charles Blades was shot in the face with a .38 caliber handgun. Brian Blades claimed the gun discharged accidentally during a struggle between them. He was charged with manslaughter and went to trial in 1996. A jury initially found him guilty, but the presiding judge overturned the conviction just days later, citing insufficient evidence to support the verdict. The ruling effectively acquitted Blades, and an appellate court later upheld that decision. He was never retried and continued his NFL career afterward. Randall Woodfield was once a promising athlete drafted by the Green Bay Packers in 1974 as a wide receiver. Though he never played in a regular season NFL game, his talent was evident during his time at Portland State University. But beneath the surface of his athletic potential was a dark and disturbing secret waiting to unravel. After being cut from the Packers during training camp, Woodfield returned to Oregon. What followed would stun law enforcement for decades. Between 1975 and 1981, a series of violent crimes swept across the Pacific Northwest. Robberies, sexual assaults, and a mounting number of murders, many occurring near Interstate 5. Woodfield, dubbed the I-5 Killer, left a trail of horror in his wake, with crimes spanning from Washington to California. His signature often included attacks on women in restrooms, homes, and office buildings, sometimes leaving behind a roll of duct tape or a .32 caliber bullet casing. It wasn't until the brutal 1981 murder of Sherry Irely and the attempted murder of Beth Wilmot in Salem, Oregon, that the pattern finally began to crack. Wilmot survived and later identified Woodfield as her attacker. Combined with eyewitness accounts, forensic evidence, and a growing stack of linked crimes, Woodfield was arrested. In March 1981, he was convicted of murder, attempted murder, and multiple sexual assaults. He received a life sentence plus 165 years. To this day, Randall Woodfield remains behind bars in Oregon, suspected in over 40 unsolved cases. Josh Brent, a defensive tackle for the Dallas Cowboys, entered the NFL in 2010 after being selected in the supplemental draft. A former University of Illinois standout, Brent showed promise as a formidable force on the defensive line. But just as his career was beginning to take shape, a devastating night in December 2012 changed everything. Brent was behind the wheel of his Mercedes-Benz in the early hours of the morning when the car struck a curb at high speed, flipped, and burst into flames. Riding with him was his close friend and teammate Jerry Brown, a member of the Cowboys practice squad. Brown was killed instantly. Brent was charged with intoxication manslaughter after police reported his blood alcohol level was more than twice the legal limit. Witnesses said he attempted to pull Brown from the wreckage, visibly shaken and disoriented. The case drew national attention, not just for its tragic outcome, but for the deeper questions it raised about accountability, substance abuse, and the culture surrounding NFL players. In January 2014, Brent was convicted and sentenced to 180 days in jail and 10 years of probation. He was released later that year, rejoined the Cowboys briefly in 2014, and later worked in a scouting role for the organization. But the shadow of that night never truly faded. Tommy Kane was drafted by the Seattle Seahawks in 1988 and played 5 seasons with the team, recording over 2,300 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns. A Montreal native, he was known for his explosive speed and agility, traits that briefly lit up the league. But after injuries shortened his NFL run, Kane's life moved into darkness, far from the glow of stadium lights. In November 2003, that darkness turned deadly. Kane's estranged wife, Tamara Sheikh, arrived at his home in Montreal to accompany him to a scheduled anger management session. But an argument erupted. In a shocking act of violence, Kane attacked her, stabbing her repeatedly in the neck and upper body. She died at the scene. Their 4 children were waiting in a car outside. The case stunned the public. Kane was arrested at the scene and charged with second-degree murder. During the trial, his defense argued mental illness and emotional instability, citing long-standing issues with depression and unmanaged anger. But the brutality of the attack was undeniable. In 2004, Kane pleaded guilty to manslaughter. The court sentenced him to 18 years in prison. Jim Dunaway was a formidable force on the football field. Born in 1941, he played defensive tackle in the NFL and AFL for over a decade, primarily with the Buffalo Bills from 1963 to 1971. Dunaway was a central part of the Bills' dominant defense that won back-to-back AFL championships in 1964 and 1965. With 4 Pro Bowl selections to his name, he earned a reputation as one of the toughest linemen the league had ever seen. Unyielding, aggressive, and feared by opposing offenses. But decades after his football career ended, Dunaway's name would resurface under far darker circumstances. In 1998, his ex-wife Naniel Dunaway was found dead in a hot tub at her Mississippi home. Though the initial cause of death was ruled as drowning, an autopsy later revealed she had suffered a fractured skull, suggesting foul play. Suspicion quickly turned to Dunaway, who was reportedly locked in a bitter legal dispute over financial assets at the time of her death. Despite mounting circumstantial evidence, a grand jury ultimately declined to indict Jim Dunaway for murder. Civil proceedings, however, painted a different picture. In 2002, a Mississippi jury found him liable for her wrongful death and ordered him to pay $579,000 to her estate. No criminal conviction was ever secured, but the stain on his legacy was permanent. Ray Lewis was a powerhouse linebacker and the face of the Baltimore Ravens for 17 seasons. Drafted in 1996, he quickly became one of the most feared defenders in the history of the NFL. A 2-time Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP, and 13-time Pro Bowler, his legacy seemed untouchable. But in the early hours of January 31st, 2000, everything changed. After a night out in Atlanta following a Super Bowl party, a brawl erupted outside a nightclub. When it ended, two men, Jacynth Baker and Richard Lawler, lay dead from stab wounds. Lewis and two companions fled the scene in a white limousine. Days later, police charged all three men with murder. The image of the NFL star now stood in stark contrast, courtroom-bound, shackled, facing the possibility of life behind bars. As the trial unfolded, the prosecution's case began to fray. Witnesses recanted. Physical evidence directly linking Lewis to the stabbings was scarce. Ultimately, in a dramatic turn, Lewis struck a plea deal, obstruction of justice, in exchange for his testimony against his co-defendants. The murder charges were dropped, and Lewis was sentenced to 12 months of probation and fined $250,000 by the NFL. The two other men were acquitted. The white suit Lewis wore that night was never recovered. Lewis returned to the field that same year and dominated the league for more than a decade afterward. Leonard Little was a defensive powerhouse in the NFL, playing his entire career with the St. Louis Rams from 1998 to 2009. A Super Bowl champion and two-time All-Pro selection, Little built a reputation as a fierce pass rusher, recording over 80 career sacks. But behind the accolades was a single moment that cast a long, permanent shadow over everything he achieved. In October 1998, just months after being drafted, Little was celebrating his 24th birthday in downtown St. Louis. He left the party intoxicated, got behind the wheel of his Lincoln Navigator, and ran a red light, crashing into another vehicle. The impact killed 47-year-old Susan Gutweiler, a mother and a wife. Little's blood alcohol level was 0.19, more than twice the legal limit. He was charged with involuntary manslaughter and eventually pleaded guilty. In a widely criticized outcome, he was sentenced to just 90 days in jail for years of probation and 1,000 hours of community service. Many felt the punishment bore no relation to the gravity of the crime. And in 2004, his name surfaced again, this time for driving under the influence while still on probation. He was acquitted of felony DUI, but found guilty of misdemeanor speeding and failure to maintain a single lane. Despite the criminal record, Little returned to professional football. But for many, his career will always be defined not by the sacks, but by the night that took a woman's life. Dante Stallworth was a first-round pick in the 2002 NFL Draft. Known for his speed and deep threat ability as a wide receiver, he played for teams like the New Orleans Saints, Philadelphia Eagles, and New England Patriots over a 9-year career, accumulating over 4,800 receiving yards and 35 touchdowns. At his peak, Stallworth was a reliable offensive weapon. But his promising career took a devastating and irreversible turn in the early hours of March 14, 2009. In Miami Beach, Stallworth had been drinking at a hotel bar. Hours later, while driving his black Bentley on the MacArthur Causeway, he struck and killed 59-year-old Mario Reyes, a construction crane operator who was crossing the street after finishing a long night of work. Stallworth's blood alcohol level was 0.126, well above Florida's legal limit. He was arrested and charged with DUI manslaughter, a felony carrying up to 15 years in prison. But what followed stunned the public. Stallworth accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to just 30 days in jail, 2 years of house arrest, and 8 years of probation. He also reached a confidential financial settlement with the Reyes family. The NFL suspended him for the entire 2009 season, though he later returned to play briefly before retiring. For many who followed the case, the punishment never felt proportionate to what was taken. Robert Rozier was a defensive end with raw athleticism who played college football at the University of California and briefly reached the NFL in 1979 with the St. Louis Cardinals. But after just 6 games, his football career ended, and what followed was far darker than anyone could have predicted. In the early 1980s, Rozier became deeply entangled with a violent religious cult led by Yahweh ben Yahweh in Miami. This was not simply spiritual extremism. It was organized, deliberate criminal violence. Rozier admitted to killing 7 people as part of deadly rituals carried out to prove loyalty to the group. The victims were often former members or perceived enemies of the movement. He later confessed that he marked each kill by severing an ear as proof, an act that chilled even the most seasoned investigators who reviewed his file. In 1986, facing overwhelming evidence, Rozier agreed to testify against Yahweh ben Yahweh and other cult leaders in exchange for a lighter sentence. He served 10 years in prison and was released under a witness protection program. But freedom didn't last. In 1999, he was arrested again, this time for check fraud, triggering California's three strikes law. Rozier was sentenced to 25 years to life. O.J. Simpson was once a household name celebrated for one of the most electrifying careers in NFL history. A Heisman Trophy winner, 5-time Pro Bowler, and the first running back to rush for over 2,000 yards in a 14-game season. Nicknamed the Juice, he played for the Buffalo Bills and San Francisco 49ers before transitioning into acting and broadcasting. For a generation of Americans, O.J. Simpson was a symbol of athletic greatness. But in 1994, that admiration turned to shock. On June 12th of that year, Simpson's ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend Ron Goldman were found brutally murdered outside her Los Angeles home. Simpson quickly became the prime suspect. 5 days later, the world watched live as he led police on a slow-speed chase down the freeway in a white Ford Bronco, a gun reportedly held to his own head in the back seat. What followed was dubbed the trial of the century, a courtroom drama saturated with racial tension, celebrity attorneys, and explosive evidence that held an entire nation captive. Despite what prosecutors called a mountain of forensic proof, including DNA evidence, a bloodstained glove, and shoe prints, Simpson was acquitted of both murders in 1995. But the legal battles didn't end there. In 1997, a civil court found him liable for the deaths and ordered him to pay $33.5 million to the victims' families. Then in 2007, Simpson was arrested in Las Vegas for armed robbery and kidnapping, stemming from a confrontation over personal sports memorabilia. This time, there was no escape. He was convicted and sentenced to 33 years in prison, ultimately serving nearly 9 before being released on parole in 2017. O.J. Simpson died on April 10th, 2024 at the age of 76. He passed away in Las Vegas. Darren Sharper was one of the most decorated safeties of his generation. A 5-time Pro Bowler who played for the Green Bay Packers, Minnesota Vikings, and New Orleans Saints, Sharper won a Super Bowl with New Orleans in 2010 and finished his career with 63 interceptions, one of the highest totals in NFL history. After retiring, he transitioned into television work as an NFL network analyst. He was polished, respected, and seemingly untouchable. But behind that public image, something deeply sinister had been building for years. Between 2013 and 2014, Sharper was accused of drugging and sexually assaulting multiple women across several states: Louisiana, California, Arizona, Nevada, and Ohio. The pattern was chilling in its consistency. Investigators found that Sharper would meet women at bars or parties, offer them drinks laced with sedatives, and assault them while they were incapacitated. The number of victims grew as law enforcement agencies began sharing information across state lines. In total, Sharper faced charges connected to more than a dozen women. In 2015 and 2016, he pleaded guilty or no contest to charges across multiple jurisdictions. The cumulative result was a federal sentence of 18 years in prison, with additional state sentences running concurrently. The fall was absolute, from Super Bowl champion and television personality to one of the most prolific predators ever connected to professional sports. Plaxico Burress was a wide receiver who spent 11 seasons in the NFL, winning a Super Bowl with the New York Giants in Super Bowl 42, catching the game-winning touchdown from Eli Manning with 35 seconds remaining. It was one of the most iconic plays in Super Bowl history. At his peak, Burress was one of the most physically gifted receivers in the game, 6 feet 5 inches, with exceptional hands and the ability to win jump balls no one else could contest. But on the night of November 28, 2008, Burress walked into a Manhattan nightclub with an unlicensed handgun tucked into the waistband of his sweatpants. The weapon slipped. As he reached to catch it, it discharged, shooting him in the right thigh. He was his own victim, but the legal consequences were severe. New York had a strict mandatory minimum for unlicensed firearm possession. Despite lobbying from the Giants organization and personal appeals, Burress was sentenced to 2 years in prison. He served 20 months before being released in 2011, then returned to the NFL briefly with the New York Jets and Pittsburgh Steelers. The incident effectively cost him the prime years of what should have been a Hall of Fame caliber career. If you're enjoying these stories, please like the video and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear from you. Tank Williams played safety in the NFL for the Tennessee Titans and Minnesota Vikings from 2002 to 2006. A second-round pick out of Stanford, Williams was considered a hard-hitting, intelligent player with a bright future. His career was cut short by injuries, but it was what happened years later that drew renewed attention to his name. In 2012, Williams was arrested and charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon following a confrontation in Texas. Prosecutors alleged he pointed a firearm at another man during a road rage dispute. The case went to trial, and Williams was ultimately convicted. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, though the sentence was later reduced on appeal. The case served as yet another reminder that the transition out of professional football, without structure, purpose, or proper support, could unravel even the most seemingly stable lives. Leroy Hill was a linebacker for the Seattle Seahawks, drafted in the 3rd round in 2005 out of Clemson. Over 7 seasons, Hill was a productive and physical presence in Seattle's defense, recording over 400 tackles across his career. But his time in the NFL was repeatedly overshadowed by off-field incidents. Hill was arrested multiple times during his playing career for marijuana possession, domestic violence, and weapons charges. Each time, the league and the Seahawks attempted rehabilitation measures. Each time, the issues resurfaced. After his NFL career ended, the troubles continued. In 2012, Hill was arrested for assault following a domestic incident in which a woman sustained injuries requiring hospital treatment. The repeated nature of his offenses drew criticism from victim advocates who felt the NFL's handling of players with chronic behavioral histories was systemically inadequate. Hill's story became less about a single catastrophic moment and more about a slow, grinding pattern that nobody stopped in time. Sam Hurd was a wide receiver and special teams contributor who played for the Dallas Cowboys and Chicago Bears from 2006 to 2011. Never a star, Hurd carved out a reliable role as a depth receiver and was considered a solid locker room presence. That reputation made what came next all the more shocking. In December 2011, Hurd was arrested by federal agents in a Chicago restaurant immediately after attempting to purchase 5 to 10 kilograms of cocaine and 1,000 pounds of marijuana per week from an undercover agent. Hurd had allegedly told the agent he was building a major drug distribution operation in the Chicago area, claiming he already had a network in place. He wasn't dabbling. By his own alleged admission, he was attempting to become one of the largest drug suppliers in the region. In 2013, Hurd pleaded guilty to federal drug conspiracy charges. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, a sentence that floored many who had watched him play. There was no violent crime, no weapon drawn, no victim harmed in the immediate sense. But the ambition and scale of what he had planned made it one of the more staggering off-field revelations in recent NFL history. Dave Meggett was one of the most versatile and electrifying players of his era. A 5-time Pro Bowl return specialist and running back, Meggett won 2 Super Bowls, one with the New York Giants and one with the New England Patriots. Small in stature, but electric with the ball in his hands, Meggett was beloved by fans and teammates alike during a career that spanned from 1989 to 1998. But after football, Meggett's life deteriorated rapidly and disturbingly. He accumulated a lengthy criminal record involving sexual assault accusations across multiple incidents over several years. In 2006, he was convicted in Canada of sexual assault and robbery following an incident in Toronto. The conviction carried a significant prison sentence. It was not an isolated case. Prior incidents had raised flags that were not adequately addressed. The contrast between the player fans remembered and the man revealed in court documents was jarring. Meggett's case became a focal point in broader conversations about accountability for professional athletes whose fame had long insulated them from consequences that ordinary citizens would have faced much sooner. From fame and fortune to prison cells and courtrooms, these stories serve as a chilling reminder. Talent can take you to the top, but the choices you make can bring everything crashing down. Some of these men were heroes once, but history remembers them very differently now. If you found this story compelling, make sure to like and subscribe. There are many more stories like this, and each one reveals just how thin the line can be between greatness and downfall. Thank you very much.